I'm often presented with a particular series of questions about macrobiotics. And one of them is, well, what makes macrobiotics different from anything else, from any other kind of way of eating? And particularly this is the case because now there are many different approaches to healing with food that make very similar claims to macrobiotics. And so I thought it would be just interesting to share a couple of ideas with you about that phenomena. The first thing that we might want to look at is that there are really two aspects of what happens with a healing process in relationship to diet. And they're very simple and straightforward. One of them has to do with what you stop doing. The other one has to do with what you do. Now, one of the things that you may notice as a characteristic of many of the different approaches to eating that have been put forward that have a healing effect is that almost all of them say to avoid the same stuff. Avoid junk, basically. Avoid junk and poison. Don't eat food that has chemicals in it, and don't eat what has been developed as the standard American, or now becoming the standard European, and perhaps even, although it's a horrific idea, the standard world diet, which is a fast food diet. Get off the fast food. Right? Eat less sugar. Eat less fat, or maybe cut out animal fat altogether. Eat less protein, or maybe cut out animal protein altogether. These are things that across the board, with most sensible dietary approaches, you're going to find are significant. The second thing is good quality food. Eat good quality food. This means you're eating organic food, eating more vegetables, eating more foods that are natural and not processed, and certainly not over-processed. So those things are things that are consistent across the board. Now, the importance of that is that what you're doing there is you're taking away nutritional stress. Those things are nutritional stressors. The body has to work harder in order to figure out what to do with that kind of food. And so when you relieve the stress from the body's natural healing mechanisms start to kick into play. And so this is a natural thing. If you stop eating junk, no matter what else you eat, you're going to be better, right? If you stop eating junk and you eat just good quality natural foods, no matter what your problem is, you're going to get better. In fact, your condition may transform itself completely. You may even go into recovery from a very serious disease. And that's fantastic. We should be supporting that kind of movement in any way that we can. But that's not the particular distinction of macrobiotics. Macrobiotics is based on a philosophy. It's based on a philosophy of life, and part of that philosophy of life has to do with understanding the way that we relate to nature. How do we relate to the natural world that we live in, and also how do we adapt to change? And this is where macrobiotics comes into the fore. You see, if you put forward a particular diet and you say this is a diet for everyone, how can that be? How can a person living on the equator have the same diet as an Eskimo? How can a person who's a bodybuilder have exactly the same diet as somebody who is very sedentary? How can that be? You see, we come up against some impossibilities there. And so things that are all well and good in those previous aspects of diet that I talked about are fine in the short run. But in the long run, we need to have adaptability. And that's what macrobiotics has to offer. It has to offer adaptability, a way of understanding food so that we can adjust our diet according to not only our individual condition, but also the environment that we live in, also the kind of activity that we perform. And so if you're an 85-year-old grandmother, or if you're a 15-year-old kid that plays sports, you should be able to adapt your diet to suit your particular needs. That's something that's very important, and that's something that macrobiotics offers. Part of that adaptability is being able to prepare food well, so that the food tastes good and so that you can have the variety that you need. I'm constantly coming up against people who tell me that they were on a diet that was making them feel good, but they couldn't sustain it. And oftentimes the reason they couldn't sustain it was they got bored with their food, right? The way you stop food boredom is learning how to cook. Now I know there are many people out there that say you've got to eat it raw because you're going to murder the food and you're going to destroy the enzymes. Well, you have to really do your own research on that, but everything that lives creates enzymes. And we're constructed to create the enzymes that we need. Is it good to have enzymes in food? Well, of course it is, right? But if we're eating a healthy diet of really good quality food that's been prepared well, we will create the enzymes that we need in order to utilize that food effectively and efficiently. And so, is it okay to have raw food from a macrobiotic point of view? Well, of course it is. Some food we're going to have as raw, and some food we're going to have as lightly cooked, and some food we're going to have as maybe preserved in some way, like might be pickled or fermented. Other foods are going to be cooked longer because we want them to be more hardy and we want them to be more warming, maybe because the climate changes and it gets colder, right? Cooking is the way that we adapt our food to meet our circumstances. So macrobiotic cooking is probably one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself, is learning how to prepare good food. The last issue I want to talk very briefly is an issue that sometimes comes up as a sidebar, and that is that the diet that we eat that is going to be healthy for us is going to be a diet which is healthy for the planet. And that means it's going to be a sustainable diet. Regardless of the great nutritional benefits of any single food, whether it's avocados or whether it's coconuts or whether it's pineapples or whatever, right? Eating a diet which is based on exotic foods, foods which cannot feed the world, right, is going down the wrong avenue. If we are part of nature and if we want to be integrated in with the environment, if we want to create a human ecology that really works, we have to think, how do we create a diet, a way of eating, which can feed everyone on the planet with good quality food? And so we're going to have to look at how we cultivate grains, beans, and vegetables, which are regional vegetables, so that we can feed ourselves and maintain a good level of health in the process of doing that. In some cases it means going back and looking at what our ancestors really ate, not the mythology, right? Sometimes it means taking foods out of our diet which we may love a lot, but diminishing them slowly over time because they're foods that do not serve our environmental needs, right? So these are all things that are part of macrobiotics. So the conversation of macrobiotics and food is a very big conversation. It's not a conversation that's looking at a specific magical micronutrient. It's a conversation that's looking at our relationship to the world that we live in, how we can become healthy and how we can become a creative part of this world so that we all move forward together. And that's an important part of the macrobiotic dream and the macrobiotic vision. Thank you.